The game industry is becoming far too boring. It is samey, it's predictable. I've seen this same movie on repeat a million times now. And I'm talking about a game releasing, and it doesn't look very good, no one's excited, and then it predictably flops. It does terribly, no one wants to spend full price on it, and that's basically it. It's a big failure. This has happened now. I feel like Starfield was the catalyst. That was the last game where, purely based on studio reputation, people like myself, I was as dumb as anyone. I rushed, bought it, I got the deluxe edition, played it early, like some people apparently did with Avowed, if you can believe it. People paid an extra $20 to play this thing early, single-player game. Why? But hypocrite, I did this with Starfield. But that was the last one where people bought a game on reputation alone, were completely disappointed, and realized they wasted their money. There was a time where I felt like gamers just kept making that mistake. A bit of fancy marketing, and they would just buy anything. No matter what the studio had shat out in the past, or just the scams that go on in the games industry in terms of just something that looks good but turns out to be total rubbish. It's a trend for a long time. Gamers never learn. But they do seem to be learning now, which is why games like Avowed are just flopping, one after the other. We've seen it with the Veilguard, Sony with their exciting first-party releases. They give us Concord, no one plays it, despite the marketing and games journalism and all that sort of stuff. They're all just kind of flopping, one after the other, and it feels like sort of make-believe, fantasy world, like too good to be true, but it keeps happening. It's now become, doesn't matter how good your marketing is, how much money you spend on billboards, advertisement on the bus that's going past, all that sort of crap, YouTube ads, whatever, that doesn't work anymore. It's all word of mouth. Word of mouth is either going to make your game, in the case of Baldur's Gate, Elden Ring, whatever it might be, Marvel Rivals. I don't care about live service, but it seems to have done really, really well, so good for that game. It's just all word of mouth. It goes the opposite way as well. The Veilguard, it's in a franchise, Dragon Age, which was beloved, and people had been waiting for a new entry for the longest time. But people get on the internet, they talk about the game, they note how awful it is, and you could just open your eyes as well, look at it, and come to that conclusion. And negative word of mouth overcame, for instance, the BioWare brand recognition. I mean, that should have torpedoed after Anthem, but it was still there in some people's minds. RPG greatness associated with BioWare, so you'd think that might be a thing. The Dragon Age franchise name, all the marketing getting shoved down everyone's throats. The negative word of mouth, it overcomes, it transcends all of that in 2025. That's just how it is now. It's the new reality for games. Your game generally is going to either be a smash hit that does extremely well, and it's like the next big thing. It's going to be 20 million copies sold. Your studio is going to be laughing for the next decade. You're going to be fine. You can flop 2 or 3 times in a row, and you're going to be fine because you had this big smash hit like a Baldur's Gate 3. Or it's just going to flop absolutely miserably, and everyone's just going to be laughing at you on the Steam charts. You can't even crack 15k players, 20k players in the case of Avowed. It peaked at, 17,000 concurrent Steam players on its release. Keeping in mind that it had already come out on early access, some of those 17,000 were probably just people who'd already bought it. They're not necessarily new players who were jumping in. So Avowed flopped terribly. I didn't really predict it would do this badly, and some people might not understand, but Concord had like 200 or 300 players. I mean, that's bad. I mean, this is like 20 times more players. That sounds pretty good. Well, Concord was like an unprecedented failure to the point where like Sony unreleased it and pretended it never happened. Like, some people don't understand just how badly that flopped. Like, that did worse than Lord of the Rings Gollum. Most indie games have more players than that. That's just how catastrophic that was. But make no mistake, 17,000 players for Avowed, is putrid. That's extremely bad for a game that's had marketing put into it, advertising everywhere, probably paid people to play it and talk positively about it. Obviously the game journos sucking up to it and all of that. Obsidian being, I think they said the other day, we're going to be around for 100 years. We've got an 100-year plan. They jinxed it because now they look like the next Tango, who put out, what was it, Hi-Fi Rush, which probably had more players than this, and that studio was shut down. So things looking a bit dicey for Obsidian. But this is the new trend. Can't even really blame just Obsidian for this, because we're seeing this time and time again. If a game doesn't have hype around it, real hype from word of mouth online, real potential players, if people aren't excited about it and rallying around a game before release, it's not going to do well. And I don't think it's a bad faith thing, because there's all these arguments getting thrown around. Oh, it's just because people are doing the anti-woke thing and they're just getting outraged over nothing, clicks and hate, blah, blah, blah. Well, that isn't really the case, because if you look at Kingdom Come Deliverance 2, that had some negativity leading up to release, not really about the game's quality, but about like an LGBT thing in the game. So maybe there was some questionable decisions made by the developer, but the overall game, most people could see that it was really good, and it's done extremely well on Steam. So the people trying to say bad faith actors are causing games to flop, that's a cope. It's just gamers as a whole identifying, does something look good or does it look like crap? Are the developers playing smoke and mirrors? So they're trying to market it and make something look good, polish a turd, but it's just the usual garbage that we don't want to waste our money on. Gamers seem to have worked that out. What is actually going to be good after, again, these fiascos in the past? Starfield, maybe Cyberpunk, even though I liked the game, even at launch on PC, but that was a game that shouldn't have been released in the state it was. There's been so many of these, it's sort of caught up with the games industry, I think. So something that looks less than exciting is just going to be a big flop. There's no real way to escape that. You're not going to get away if you do the marketing, oh, we'll sneak up to 3 or 4 million copies sold. It may not be a behemoth, but we'll do okay. We can get away with that. That doesn't happen now. You either sink or swim. Your game's a big success or it's a big flop. And there might be some negatives with that. Maybe some decent games don't do as well as they maybe should because they don't get hyped up around word of mouth, but I haven't seen too many examples of that. It seems to me mostly games that deserve to fail do fail. In Obsidian's case, they used to put out classic games. They used to put out Knights of the Old Republic 2. They put out New Vegas. Genuinely fantastic games, and they followed it up with mostly mediocrity since, and they seem to be past their peak. So to me, Obsidian probably deserve a kick up the arse. A game like this that isn't the worst thing ever, but it shouldn't really be a success. Nothing about it looks good, feels pretty soulless, no one really gave a shit, they were just trying to get a game out quickly. They've talked about, we set fair budgets and we plan it, basically. Their whole business strategy, Obsidian, is don't make anything too good, let's just make sure it's safe, get it out there, and keep the wheels turning. That's basically their mindset. I don't think that's going to work in games anymore. People want the next big thing, the next great thing. They don't want something ordinary that's priced at the same cost as a Baldur's Gate 3 or something like that. You can just see from a million miles away that Avowed was never going to be anything good. And I've talked about this game for a bit. Didn't talk about it that much recently, it just got too boring, there wasn't too much to say. I think the whole story of Avowed is that it made a terrible second impression. I was going to say first impression, but the original trailer was actually quite good, got people excited, had an interesting art style, and then it was just downhill after that. They showed off the game again, everything cool looking was just replaced by just this bland, Play-Doh-y looking art style. The combat was alright, but they were selling that as like the best thing about the game. Oh, look at this combat. It's not absolutely abysmal like it is in a lot of Obsidian games. But then it was missing everything that people actually like about Obsidian. The narrative, questing, there was nothing. They barely even showed that before release, in fact. Settlements and exploring in that vein around little cities or towns. Not a whole lot of that. It was just all about combat and maybe some simple puzzle solving. And that wasn't going to get anyone excited about an Obsidian game. From what I've heard, because I'm not buying this. I have no plans to buy it while it's $70. It's a wait for a sale game. It's a title that there's no reason to rush out and waste your money on it right now, when it is partly because Avowed's mediocre, but I think it's also that when a game is on Game Pass, like Avowed is, and if I really wanted, I could subscribe for a few bucks and play it. Just knowing I could do that makes me not want to pay full price for it. Now, it doesn't mean I'm going to sub to Game Pass and actually do it. I can't be stuffed doing that. I don't feel like doing that. But it just makes you feel like this game isn't worth buying because they're giving it away almost for a little subscription service that's much cheaper. I think that does lower the value proposition, even if it doesn't mean you're going to sub to Game Pass. It's a weird thing that Microsoft have created, I think, where the games they release just feel like they're worth less. They're just cheap, nasty, kind of like Netflix original TV shows, which just feel much lower quality than any good TV shows released 10, 15 years ago, HBO, all that sort of stuff, when that was all good, classic stuff. But Avowed itself, so terrible player numbers, a bit of a flop. Again, I don't really need to talk about why this flopped, because we know it just never looked very good. There was nothing exciting in the marketing. The developers, they were just not telling us what we should be getting pumped about. They were saying, don't expect anything like Baldur's Gate 3, that feature's not going to be in it, that feature over there, nah, don't expect that, that's asking too much. They weren't even trying to excite people, so I'm not sure what they really expected. Again, this isn't the Veilguard levels of awful, I don't think, but it's not much better. It's not going to pull anyone in. Your game has to really sell people these days for them to buy it. That's just the new reality. You've got to make something genuinely interesting, not your 6, 7 out of 10 safe game. You've still got the coping Obsidian fanboys, of course, for instance, here on Reddit, and this was 2 days ago, so around the time it actually released. Avowed is the #1 seller in US on Steam, 1 million upvotes, alright, it's a huge success. They counted their chickens before they hatched it, and now this just looks quite embarrassing for them, because Avowed released when nothing else was coming out. In fact, Microsoft moved the Avowed release date from November to now because they were counting on there being nothing else to play, basically. Like, the closest was Civilization 7, which people are saying isn't very good, or it's half-baked or whatever. So, aside from that, not a whole lot. Now, that did bite them on the ass because Kingdom Come Deliverance 2 was delayed. Assassin's Creed Shadows also delayed until next month. Not that anyone cares about Ubisoft anymore. I don't think that's anything to do with Avowed flopping, but they specifically moved Avowed to a quiet window, apparently. So that's why it's the #1 seller in the US. Whether it still is, who knows? Probably not. I've seen it slipping on a few other screenshots that have done the round. It was actually lower than the Outer Worlds, and I think Pillars of Eternity, selling less than those games right now. So that tells you how things are going. But there was all these comments like, we told you those anti-wokers, this game's a huge mammoth success. Me here on Reddit, I know reality and how normal people are thinking. People love this game. And then, unfortunately for them, true reality sets in and they disappear. But there was a bit of that going on. The happiness has turned into a big frown since then, as people realize we're deluded. The game is a massive flop. No one's interested, and the excitement, I was telling myself how good this game looked, that's not shared by anyone else. I'm the weird one, basically, is how these people are reacting. They're resorting to this now. This is the best that they can come up with. The game isn't getting review bombed. People have genuine complaints. The complaint. So they're just kind of making fun of people suggesting Avowed actually has real issues, and this complaint is meant to show that no criticism of Avowed is valid. It's all the anti-wokers. They won't stop. And it's a review that says the game has been one of the most disappointing experiences I've ever encountered. It fails to be entertaining or immersive. Appreciate the developer's efforts, but it's lackluster and has a woke agenda. So apparently, any opinions he's had about the game, I've shortened it obviously, but any negative opinions he's had about the game all of that is invalid because he mentioned the woke agenda, and that proves all the people criticizing Avowed, they're just getting on the hate train. They're listening to the clickbait YouTubers. They won't stop. It's all a big conspiracy to make these games fail. Avowed didn't deserve this. It's these anti-wokers. This is proof. One single Metacritic review. Now, I don't even really understand why these people are defending the game, because Avowed flopping is basically gamers saying, hey, we expect more. We're not going to take average, mediocre, Outer World style RPG anymore, although I hear a lot of people say Avowed is more like a Borderlands or something. It's barely an RPG, like an Outer Worlds or something, like classic Obsidian games. They've just watered things down even more, chasing a bit of an action crowd or something like looter, sort of shooter vibe, where it's all about looting. It's all about looting. It's not about making real choices, real decisions, stats, and everything like that. That's all been sort of peeled away in Avowed. The gamers are basically saying, we want more. We expect more. We're not going to tolerate maybe what we would have 5 or 6 years ago, when RPGs especially were in a pretty rough place. Like that period, probably just before Witcher 3, there's pretty much nothing. There was like BioWare, Bethesda, and the odd Obsidian game. There was nothing else really. But things are changing. Gamers have higher standards now. And despite what developers said about, oh no, Baldur's Gate 3 was like an anomaly. That can't happen again. You can't expect that. You've got to accept being fed shit, and you've got to like it, basically. You've got to just be okay with that, because to expect more, that's too much, despite you paying $70 for our half-assed release. The game industry has tried that. It's not working. Gamers want more, and how is that a bad thing? How can you be whinging and complaining on Reddit about that? What are you getting out of that? I mean, if Avowed's a huge success, it tells the industry mediocrity will sell. Don't bother putting in effort, because gamers are idiots and they'll buy anything anyway. So, you've got the game, you can play it and have fun. Why are you so salty about other people having a high standard and giving their criticisms? But that's what Reddit's decided to do, and there's comments like this. I miss the PS2 era when these people didn't have a platform and couldn't influence a game's success by deterring potential players. I've seen people who have Game Pass Ultimate who won't even try the game for themselves because someone else told them the game is bad. They may have just opened their eyes, looked at Avowed and gone, that doesn't look remotely cool. Name me one character in Avowed who you'd actually want to hang out with in real life. You'd want to bring them out of the game world, hang out with them, watch TV with them, have a good chat. There isn't one character in Avowed you'd want to do that with, because they're all just lame. Every single one of them, it's that modern video game journalist sort of writing where everyone's a little bit quirky, they're a bit sassy. None of them are interesting. They all just kind of suck. And I wonder if the marketing team realized that, which is why most of the marketing was about the combat, nothing really to do with the quests and the dialogue and the characters. They kind of shelved all that in the promotional material, despite that historically being Obsidian's strength. So that's why it failed, because people look at it and go, nah. Even people who have access to Game Pass go, no thanks, I'm not going to waste my time on it, even if it's almost for free. I'm already paying for it. I've already got access to it. But people like this, the real thing that we see, and this is just mask off, is people just saying, I wish that gamers couldn't voice their opinion. I appreciated the days where the only gaming voice was maybe a magazine, the old school gaming magazines, and that was really it. I don't like this, that gamers can speak their mind, that the community as a whole can come together and make or break a game based on either negative or positive word of mouth. That's a horrible thing to these people. Even though I guarantee you these sorts of people are always the ones saying, the people should decide this, the people, I hate Elon Musk and he's taking over the world. These people will go on about that, but then apparently when it comes to games, people are bad. Gamers, regular gamers are bad. They're just peasants. They shouldn't be able to get a say. It should just be those that are anointed, the games journalists. Only they should get a say. Only they're qualified. Kind of tells you what these sorts of people would be like if they actually had any real power over anything and weren't just Reddit mods. But that's how it is. I think this is a really positive development. Mediocre games are not doing very well. Not even when they're huge disasters and are the worst thing ever, like the Veilguard. Just average, mediocre games, they're flopping. They're getting to 17,000 Steam players, which is awful. It tells the industry, if you want to have success, you've got to release something actually great that gets people talking, gets people excited. Now, the other thing is, will this be so bad, such a flop, that it actually leads to Microsoft shutting down Obsidian? I don't think that it will, because Avowed was getting developed before Microsoft even bought them. So, will they get another chance? Probably with the Outer Worlds 2, but I mean, if that's a huge decline from even the first one, things won't be looking so good, I feel. That 100-year plan that they had, it might not even last 10. We might be seeing the end of Obsidian. And if we're being truly honest, given the state of this release, Avowed, and just some other things that they've done, they're just following that same trajectory as Bethesda and BioWare. Maybe to a slightly lesser extent than BioWare. That is really rock bottom. But just that downward trend where it feels like new studios are doing better things, more innovative, in their prime, while we've got these old hangers-on in Obsidian and so on, who they're just kind of desperate. They've got no talent. They don't really know what they're doing. They're hanging on because of name recognition and nothing really else. Probably not the end of the world if they were to get shuttered and the remaining few good people could get on to better things. But Avowed, not looking good. We expected it. This is predictable. And the next one, what is it? Bloodlines 2? I think it's going to be more of the same. Thanks for listening. I'll see you on the next one. Cheers. Bye.